G'day guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Jasmine, and today's hot topic, I'm going to be discussing whether it is wrong to marry without your father's permission. So let's get right into it. There is no verse in the Bible that explicitly says that we must get our father's permission in order to marry. However, there are verses in the Bible that people use to support their view that you should get your father's permission to marry. And I want to look at those passages today. I want to discuss them, give you my thoughts, my ideas, how I translate these particular verses. Now, in no way at all am I trying to even discourage any young woman to not even seek her father's permission. I'm not trying to say that you shouldn't even ask, because obviously, you know, you want to have your father's blessing. But, you know, this is just an interesting topic that I want to look at. It's something personally that I've been through myself, and maybe I'll share a little bit about that later. So the first passage I do want to look at is actually in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. Now, if you're familiar with this passage basically Paul has been encouraging the people to remain single because of the present crisis, because of the persecution that's going on in the church. He's basically advising the Corinthians that it is better to remain single because they will, you know, be free of pain, and that they'll be able to serve the Lord better if they remain single rather than as a married person. So this is the context. So let me take you through 1 Corinthians chapter 7, and we're looking at verses 36 and 38. But if any man thinks that he is acting unbecomingly toward his virgin daughter, if she is past her youth, and if it must be so, let him do what he wishes. He does not sin, let her marry. But he who stands firm in his heart, being under no compulsion, but has authority over his own will, and has decided this in his own heart to keep his own virgin daughter, he will do well. So then both he who gives his own virgin daughter in marriage does well, and he who does not give her in marriage will do better. So this translation, and I'm reading from the Legacy Standard Bible, as well as the King James Version, seems to imply that the father has the right to either give his daughter away in marriage or to withhold her from marriage. Now, the original Greek is actually unclear, and scholars tend to debate as to how this should be interpreted in English. Now, for example, the ESV translation actually translates this passage a little bit differently. So let's look at that. So the same verse, the same passages. So 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 36 to 38, and this is the ESV translation. If anyone thinks that he is not behaving properly toward his betrothed, if his passions are strong, and it has to be, let him do as he wishes. Let them marry, it is no sin. But whoever is firmly established in his heart, being under no necessity, but having his desire under control, and has determined this in his heart to keep her as his betrothed, he will do well. So then he who marries his betrothed does well, and he who refrains from marriage will do even better. So this ESV translation seems to imply that if the man is not behaving properly, or if he doesn't have his desires under control, then he should marry her. But if he does have his desires under control, then he should refrain from marrying his betrothed. So which translations are actually correct? You could ask. Now, when we are looking to build our doctrine, you know, it's not good to just build our view on one verse, especially if that verse is unclear in the original Greek. So we need to just bear that in mind. Now, for me personally, I think that this translation of the ESV, is probably the one I would lean more towards, because I think it fits the overall context of the passage, of the chapter better, rather than the Legacy or King James Version. I don't think it's really about a father and a daughter. I think it just doesn't fit quite right with the overall context, because keeping in mind, this context is about whether the Corinthians, should remain single because of the present crisis, the persecution of the church, or whether they should get married. But hey, you might have a different idea and a different opinion, so make sure you let me know below. But I don't think these are passages that really support the idea that you have to get your father's permission. If we look at 1 Corinthians chapter 7, the first 2 chapters, and it says, "Now concerning the things about which you wrote, it is good for a man not to touch a woman, but because of sexual immoralities, each man is to have his own wife, and each woman is to have her own husband." So, overall, I don't think it supports this idea that you have to get your father's permission. But again, make sure you leave me a comment below, because I'd be interested to know your thoughts. Now, let's look at another passage which is actually found in the book of Numbers. So let's turn to the book of Numbers, and we're looking at chapter 30, verses 3 to 5. "Also, if a woman makes a vow to Yahweh and binds herself by an obligation in her father's house in her youth, and her father hears her vow and her obligation by which she has bound herself, and her father says nothing to her, then all her vows shall stand, and every obligation by which she has bound herself shall stand. But if her father should forbid her on the day he hears of it, none of her vows or her obligations by which she has bound herself shall stand. And Yahweh will pardon her because her father had forbidden her." So some people take this passage and try to use it and say that, see here, you do need to get your father's permission to marry because your father can just cancel out your vows. But this passage here in Numbers has actually nothing to do with wedding vows. Nothing to do with wedding vows. This passage is actually talking about personal vows to God. So let me give you an example of a personal vow. So Hannah vowed to God to give her child to God if she were to fall pregnant. So that's an example of a personal vow. It has nothing to do with wedding vows, okay? So just bear that in mind. Now, let's look at another passage, which is also in the Old Testament, and we're going to be looking at Deuteronomy chapter 7, and it's in verse 3. And it says, "Furthermore, you shall not intermarry with them. You shall not give your daughters to their sons, nor shall you take their daughters for your sons." So this verse is often used to say that, it's up to the parents to, give their daughters away in marriage. It's up to the parents to decide who their daughter is going to marry. But if you're going to say that, then you have to say it about the son as well. So you have to say, well, it's up to, the parents to decide who the son is going to marry. So it works both ways. So again, I don't think this passage really supports that idea either. Now, the last passage I want to look at is actually in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 1, and it says, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right." So this is just another example of the kind of verses that people are using to support their idea that, see, it says here, children, obey your parents, so you've got to get your father's permission. But if you're going to use that with women, then you have to use that with the men as well, and that just becomes silly. And also it's talking about children, it's not talking about adults, so you just can't use this verse to support that idea. I just think it's a little bit ridiculous. Now, obviously, I am not trying to discourage any woman at all to not even seek her father's permission. Obviously, as a woman, as a girl, we always want to feel like we have our father's blessing, our father's permission. It makes things so much easier. You feel like you've picked a good person, a good man to be your husband, to provide for you. Obviously, you want that blessing to come from your father. So I'm definitely not saying don't even ask your father. I'm not saying that at all. It's something that I've had to walk through myself. which is, you know, wasn't easy at the time, but obviously I look back on that time now and I think, you know, I never once doubted my decision. You know, my parents did not approve of me marrying Caleb just because of Christianity. You know, this whole Christian side of things was something they did not like, did not want to be a part of, and, you know, did not want to, you know, have to give me away to, you know, a Christian guy. You know, it's just not in the family, you know. But at the end of the day, it's been many, many years, 10, 11 years now almost, and, you know, they actually regret coming to the wedding. They actually regret not being there for me, not giving me away. And so, you know, I'm not saying that you as a girl shouldn't even ask your father. You know, certainly you want to always have your father's blessing. You know, it also creates, you know, peace and harmony, and you want to feel like, you know, you've picked a good guy. So always keep that in mind. But, you know, as a grown woman who lived outside the home for many, many years, I supported myself. You know, this was not a rash decision that I had made when I chose to become engaged. You know, and I still went through with it. And you know what? Things have turned out to be really good. So, you know, it's not always everybody's, you know, happy ending. Now, you might be someone who doesn't have a father. Your father may have not been in your life from a very young age. Your father may have passed away. You know, for various reasons, you may not have that father in your life. And, you know, you may seek the opinion and counsel of someone else that you look up to. And again, that's completely fine as well. But just remember, you know, it's a decision that you can make on your own. You know, obviously if you're someone who is seeking God, you're in His Word daily, you are studying His Word, you're immersed in it, you know, you are acknowledging Him in all your ways, you know, and He will make your path straight. And regardless of that decision, you know, if you feel like God is leading you to marry that person, then that's okay. It's okay if you don't have your father's blessing. You know, for me, I didn't have my father's blessing, and I still, even after I was married, still made the effort to contact him, contact both my parents, you know, and it was probably a good 12 months before they even accepted Caleb as my husband. But, you know, now things are completely different, and, you know, things are probably couldn't be better, you know. So anyway, that is my story. I hope you have enjoyed this video, and please do leave me a comment below. I do love to read your comments, and yeah, I look forward to reading them, and hopefully you'll see me again soon in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye bye.